welcome to another episode of We're Not Wizards. My name's Richard. I will be your host for today, possibly tomorrow, maybe next week, because very, very soon autumn is hitting, and oh my goodness, aren't we glad that autumn is hitting at the moment, because it's still very, very hot and muggy. In the past, we have spoken to content creators, we have spoken to game designers, game developers. We've spoken to a lot of people in the media. We've gone as far as speaking to manufacturers. But once the dust settles, once the Kickstarter finishes, once you've sat there and your credit card has been processed and your details have been taken, how does it all fit into place? So it made sense to actually maybe ask somebody who might be a little bit in the know. So I kind of scurried about and I asked some important, intelligent people, and I also asked Vaughn Reynolds. And Vaughn said, why don't you speak to Chandler Copenhaver from Crowdox? And I said, okay. So joining me today is Chandler from Crowdox. So hello, Chandler.
How you doing?
I'm very, very good. I'm very, very good.
Good.
How's yourself?
I'm doing well.
That's good. As I say, the reason that we got you on tonight, I think you're kind of like one of the last pieces in what we would call the Kickstarter kind of puzzle. As in, you know, when the excitement is kind of has reached its peak and the game is funded, and then it's kind of what happens next. But in We're Not Wizards tradition, we obviously we want to find out a little bit about your good self, kind of first of all. Now, for people who are joining us for the first time, thank you very much for joining us. The reason that we do this is because we're almost at episode 200 now, and I just need to get to episode 200, and then I can sit back and do nothing for the rest of my years. And as I say, the second reason that I'm doing this is because I'm just a nosy person, and I want to ask Chandler lots of nosy questions and see if he'll, answer them or not. Do you want to start off by telling us kind of a little bit about, obviously, yourself, how you kind of got involved in the kind of the hobby in the first place?
Absolutely. So the for me, crowdfunding, the whole Kickstarter world, really started when I was before I got married, and I was a single dude, and my buddy introduced me to he showed me this watch, the smartwatch. It was back I think 2012. It was the Pebble smartwatch, and so the first one. I think there's been quite a few, but so back then he showed that to me and showed me kind of told me about crowdfunding. And I had been already pretty active in like new products and things like that, but this was like a whole nother level of getting in and involved with something before it even existed, and that was pretty cool. So I ended up backing that watch way back in the day, and then
you still got the watch?
I still have it, but I didn't.
Still work?
It still works. There's a little glitch in it every once in a while, but surprisingly, it's still good. I mean, it was definitely an experience, though, right? Being a backer for the first time, for that type of campaign, especially. I mean, a technology product. It took a good year and a half, I think, to get the product, and it was late by like 9 months or more. So it was an interesting scenario to be to experience, but I'm definitely the optimist in respect to crowdfunding. So I was stoked no matter what, just to get it.
And where did your interest in kind of tabletop come from then? I mean, have you been playing board games for a while? Are you quite new to getting into that side of the hobby?
Yeah, actually, I've been playing Magic since I was pretty young. My first memory of that's probably what got me really into the hobby side of the tabletop world. I played Magic quite a bit through as a junior high kind of age and teenage, and then played numerous games and played Catan and all of those games along the way, but really diving deeper came through once I started more heavily working and also backing things on Kickstarter. Started to back a lot more games.
Do you remember what your first kind of game was that you kind of got involved in the kind of the Kickstarter side of things?
The first board game, so Secret Hitler was one that I backed. I don't know if that was the first. I would definitely remember that was the biggest, or the most prominent, so it kind of sticks out. I backed Joking Hazard, and that doesn't really fit in the hobby category, but it's still an interesting, fun little game. But I backed Secret Hitler, and then got more involved with more strategy-based games and social deduction games. I mean, started diving deeper, and especially as I've had the opportunity to work with more creators, it's a huge focus and passion for me to get even, to really understand and know the games of the creators we work with, not just from a business standpoint or anything like that, but just, I absolutely love gaming, so it kind of works out really well.
What are you playing at the moment?
Most recently, I played a game called Aegis, and so they did a successful Kickstarter. My wife and I took the better part of yesterday, since yesterday was Labor Day here in the States, and
of course it was, yeah.
So I labored on that board game, and it was a good time. It's a lighter war game, and definitely it was the first time my wife had ever played a war game, and she was actually pretty apprehensive.
Really?
But she's just like, robots, I'm not into robots. War game, I've never played a war game. But they did a good job at making it a fairly good entry or gateway game for war games, I think, because there's the hex board and the hexagonal board, and then also it's not very complex at its core, so it made it really enjoyable. We did a 2 out of 3, and I'm sad to say that she destroyed me. So.
Probably deservedly so. She's probably actually a secret war gamer.
Yeah, it's a small pastime in the wee hours of the night. Yeah,
maybe worthwhile checking what Facebook group she's kind of posting on. She's kind of secretly laughing away at you. Got him.
It's one of those things.
To play in Ages.
My wife is just good at anything she does, unfortunately, and so wow. I struggle to win at many games against her. So it's a good thing. It means that I have somebody to challenge me on some games here and there.
Yeah. I mean, have you got quite a reasonable collection of games? I mean, is it a difficult thing, okay, being involved in the kind of the industry that you are, that you'll be seeing probably lots of games on a day-to-day basis, and I'm guessing you get exposure to a lot of games. Is it nice to kind of maybe step away a little bit from the tabletop hobby and do kind of other things, other kind of pastimes and hobbies, since you're kind of this kind of involved in it?
For me, I haven't gotten to the point where I've gotten, I need to kind of break away. I know that there's a lot of people, especially, publishers and designers that they're even more entrenched in the actual games themselves than I am. I have the opportunity to also work with projects of every kind, and so I'm not just solely dived into the tabletop world. And so for me, I see, we did have here I live in Utah. Crowdox, we're kind of based all over. We don't really have we don't have a central location or office, but a good number of us are here in Utah. There was a conference here called SaltCon in Utah, and so that's what I was doing this last weekend, and it was nice because I've attended numerous cons this year, but that was the first that I didn't go to work, quote unquote. So I was there to mostly just play and enjoy a bunch of games. And so I always when I do those, though, I have a tendency to be drawn and often often go and play of prototypes and a lot of help play test and things like that. I really enjoy the creative process.
Have you not thought about putting something together yourself then? Now that you've got a bit. Is this where you give us the exclusive?
Well, yeah, I'm in the process actually. I've got a game that I'm working on with my wife, and who knows where it will go. And it's obviously really horrible and terrible right now, but we're working on something. We thought, why not? Let's make something, and so we'll see where that goes. We're pretty early in the development process, so.
I'm just interested to think kind of what kind of game you would kind of make. Yeah,
I'm going to start light and simple, and so it's going to be my wife's she is a chemistry teacher, and so she's got some of the skills in that realm, and have never taken a chemistry class in my life, so it was a good idea to make a chemistry game. So that's what we're doing.
I think it's a fascinating thing because I did a little bit of chemistry at college, so I am aware of how chemicals and elements and everything bond together, and I think there could be a nice little kind of game based all around that, kind of joining all the elements together and creating big carbon chains and scoring off the back of them. And I hope I've just not nicked your game idea. Yeah,
there's also I think there's all sorts of fun opportunity around themes like that. So you can go light and you can go heavy, and we're gonna go light on this first one.
The first one. So there's other ones planned then?
Well, there's no plans, but I mean, it's by the nature of doing it once, it's the first. So
yeah, I suppose so. Has it be involved in the kind of the crowdfunding scene itself. Mm-hmm. I mean, one of the things you see talking about kind of like Kickstarter again and again and again is, there's so many projects coming through on the tabletop scene. Have you seen in your time involved in that scene, has it been a bigger skew towards that area? I mean, a lot of people are talking about, the big money is in tabletop. There's projects that are doing millions and millions of dollars now. So, I mean, if you had to, when you're approaching the business side of things, are you having to adapt to deal with that particular type of client, or do you just kind of try and treat every client again, the same basically?
It's interesting. So, the first couple of years that I worked on and worked with Kickstarter campaign creators, I did some Indiegogo as well, but mostly Kickstarter. The focus actually was on non-tabletop. So I actually, for the first couple of years, and this was before Crowdox, I was working and helping people with their marketing and some other aspects. And when I was doing that, we really struggled to see success with tabletop games. And at the time, it was a frustration, and we didn't understand why. And I really wanted to get into that scene. It's being a passion of mine, and we didn't see the same type of impact and results. And come to find, as I dove more into the community and I got more involved in some of the groups and some of the things there, I learned a lot and found that, number one, the tabletop community is by far the most impactful, most generous, and most most committed to the platform than any other one category. And the biggest reason, I think, is because of the people. Number one, the individuals involved are, and just the nature of tabletop is that we're together, we're playing, we're not. There's a lot less competition. There is competition, but it's definitely not the same as, somebody that launches a watch and somebody else launches a watch. There's going to be no collaboration between those two individuals, those two groups. And the same is true with, virtually all these other products that are out there. But with games, you don't have that. There's very little of that happens where you have somebody that, they're very hard against, hard with an NDA and requiring somebody to sign something before they talk about it. There's a lot more openness. And so, it's the power of the community, which that's what Kickstarter is all about. It's about the community, that has allowed this category to grow massively. And it's also the reason why it's so successful. Now, there is the discussion, and a lot of people say, well, the bubble is going to burst, and we can't keep having, these kinds of this kind of growth. Well, it's not really true. If you consider that if the base of let's say that there's a finite number of hobby board game backers that are currently backing, and there's probably data that we could pull somewhere on that number. If that number stays the same, then I actually do think that it could, eventually the bubble could burst. But from my experience and from what I'm seeing is that number is increasing. There are more people that are getting involved, and there are more people that are playing games and kind of coming back to the table, if you will. Because if we look at the trends just on a broader scale of board games in general, we see, where board games were, especially before video games existed or when video games were really early, or even, when I was a kid, I played a ton of Risk and we played a ton of board games, with my buddies. And part of the reason is just, there wasn't as much technological competition. And then, we had the internet come into play. And then as soon as that happened, that, everyone jumped on playing online games. And now we have like this trend of people that are just kind of burnt out of online play, or at least doing it so much because it, I think back to playing video games, which I was definitely a bigger video gamer back in the day than board games. And, but when we played games together, it was, you're sitting with your buddies on the couch and you're hitting each other between, and watching each other's screens and all that fun stuff. And, cause it was a shared experience. And, now Fortnite and all that, you're not even capable of watching or playing a game split screen anymore on a lot of these games. Bring
back Time Splitters 2.
Yeah, right?
That's all I'm asking.
Yeah.
Bring back
007.
I don't need GoldenEye because GoldenEye, looking at it now, looks like so much boxy cardboard rubbish, and everybody just come out recently and said if you used Objob, you were cheating. I think the thing with the tabletop scene is that it's a viable route to market. Even the video game crowdfunding scene, and you'd be able to correct me if I'm wrong, yeah, it's kind of still seen as an edgy, wedgy, kind of icky, sticky kind of way to market. Take Shenmue 3, yeah?
Right, yeah.
Crowdfunded, really, really popular, did a lot of money. Whereas we kind of don't know, and it relied on an awful lot of the passion. And I think what that happens is people will say, well, it's a kind of a one-off, I just kind of want that, and then we'll just kind of see. I think what happens with board games is that you will, say you get somebody sitting down and they'll bring in their, like, say, Catacombs, or they'll bring in, they'll bring in The Others, or they'll bring in No Honor Among Thieves, and then the question will be, well, that was a good fun game. Where'd you get that from? And it's like, well, I got it on Kickstarter. And it's like, well, and I think what that does is that helps introduce people into that side of the hobby and that whole community, because let's face it, there is a whole Kickstarter community that has evolved around, and you'll see the same people turn up again and again and again. I remember when I was following it, it was like, it was like the same 5 or 10 people that were doing, maybe you seen them in the CMON games, but you seen them in like, I've seen them jumping on like when I think City of Kings was out and Epoch was out and a couple of other projects, and it was the same like 5 or 6 people kind of turning up, and they were saying hello to each other, and that seemed to be what they did. They kind of went to work. They didn't have any other commitments. They would come on. They would kind of be involved in the kind of the Kickstarter scene. So I think it's viable to see that kind of grow. I think you're right about 2 products kind of coming on, and they would be in absolute competition. I think it's a good thing that it's really difficult to kind of copyright mechanics in board games.
Right.
And even themes. It's like the board game industry seems to be like the movie industry, that you'll get 2 board games that'll appear almost within 2 or 3 months of each other. and they'll be exactly the same theme, and potentially very close in terms of kind of mechanics.
So that's a whole different thing that's really interesting to me. If you actually, across the board, doesn't matter what category, board game or not, there is like, somewhere in the the gods of Kickstarter, like the universe somewhere, there's like something happening that there are people that are completely separated from each other, that are in different scenarios, that come out with products that are very similar. And it happens time and time again. I see it at least once or twice a month. And, the first, not first one, but one that I just recall very strongly, there was a company that came out with it was basically a GPS for your bike. And so you would attach it to your bike, but it would point, all that it would do is you'd set your location of where you want to go, and then it would just point the arrow like a compass of where where your destination is. And then it allows you to go any street, and then it will just, you're just continually following this arrow until you get there, which was a really cool idea. And I thought it was really fun. It was so crazy though, that idea, there were two different companies that came out within the same month with the same idea. Yeah. And one did better than the other. And that, one of them really struggled and the other one did really, really well. And, and so it was competition and survival of the fittest in that scenario. And in the tabletop world, you can have, it usually doesn't end up being so exactly the same that you can, usually the theme is different, but maybe it has similar mechanics or vice versa. And, and that's where you do have people that are, if you ask any one person, they're backing like 5 to 10 projects at one time. And, the average, right? And that's completely different than these other categories where most people that don't really back in the tabletop world, they back 1 to 2 projects at a time at the most. Yeah. So
I think the closest one I've seen recently was Dinogenics and Dinosaur Island. Yeah. And I remember Richard Keane kind of going on Facebook and saying, "Here's my Kickstarter project," and getting almost stoned to death by the wailing crowd and saying that, well, it's just like this, it's just like that, and it's kind of like, oh, okay, it's kind of the closest, but both of them funded kind of, Dinosaur Island's obviously on its second iteration now, and it's funded ridiculously well the second time round with its other additions too. It's
a whole different animal.
Dinogenics again, it's it funded kind of really, really well at the time. I mean, in terms of do you see a trend in the kind of like the, I guess, the cost of the price of pledges actually going up in the tables? Because one of the things I think that I've heard people comment on recently, and something I've noticed myself, is that the average pledge now seems to be creeping up above kind of $100, where it used to be like, $79. Now it seems to be $99. Now it seems to be $119. I mean, from your view, have you seen kind of like an increase in that kind of the base level kind of coming in?
Yeah, there is a general like increase going up, but what's interesting, so coming from a non-tabletop Kickstarter world, the average pledge on projects on Kickstarter was close to $150. That's kind of considered like the average pledge on a lot of these projects. Coming into the tabletop category, it's interestingly not too far off from that. It's fairly close. And so I think what it's really showing is where is the level of emotional investment that people have, because the emotional, so the amount of money that is spent follows the emotional investment. And so people that's why you see a lot of projects that now are charging, they have additional pledge levels that go up. I mean, I pulled up Dinogenics because you mentioned them, and, they had a basic level, and then it kind of cruised on up to sort of a, $100 level. And what ended up being most successful in their case was about a $50 pledge level. And in other scenarios, you definitely have people spending a lot more. So I think there's definitely being an increase, but I think it's matching the demand. I think just the nature of enough people testing, do you want this or do you want that? Yeah, and it's different in the tabletop categories as well, because the profit margins on a board game compared to profit margins on, say, the world's best jacket, typically
I keep seeing adverts for that, and I'm just wondering.
That's the jacket or the world's best.
Why is it the world's? How is it the world's best?
They're always the world's best. It's always the world's best.
It's like, I saw that. I was like, you always see that when you're driving through town. It's like, welcome to McSweeney's, the world's number one carpet discounter. Right. It's like, I don't even know how you could say. And then you obviously they get wise, and then they say it's the West Coast's
right.
carpet, and then you go,
or that has this feature,
Utah's number one,
yeah,
and then it's Salt Lake City, no, this street,
right, yep. It's funny how that works. Kickstarter it's so different. That's why I was telling you, like, the marketing of the world's best jacket and Dinogenics it's completely different. And you can't take the same approach. I couldn't say the world's best dinosaur park building game. Like, you would be destroyed in this community. And
I'd like to see that.
The hate mail would never stop. And I think it definitely is that way because, again, the community. Now, the pros and cons of community.
You could give Vaughn that as a project to do. Get him to do it.
The world's greatest. I've seen
just the world's greatest worker placement game.
Oh, yeah.
In brackets, better than all the other worker placement games.
That would be.
See how he gets.
That'd be a good little test right there. You would get. I mean, knowing this community, you'd get destroyed, right? And the reason. So it's the pros and cons of this community, and I speak rather brash sometimes, but I really don't care. I couldn't be bothered. Like, there's some people in this community that are incredibly sensitive, and they've developed their own status quo of how things should be done. And it really becomes an irritation to me sometimes because somebody says, oh, well, you shouldn't do it this way because of this. And some of those are sort of categorically true for board games. But just in general, I find it rather interesting and rather annoying, sometimes on the way that people are. For example, and because I can't just say that without giving an example. For example,
no, you have to.
I see a lot of backers who are super backers and they have all of these things and they say, oh, you haven't backed any other campaigns with this account, and I'm never going to back you because you don't support creators, blah blah blah, and they have all these reasons.
Yeah.
Which, if I were to create a campaign today, I would just go and have to fake it and go pledge, $1 or whatever and go back 5 or 6 campaigns, but nobody's seeing my actual personal account because I'm going to launch. If I launch a Kickstarter campaign, I do it out of a business account and. Set up my taxes, my LLC, and everything properly. But you're not going to see that I've backed over 200 campaigns, just because, the nature of how Kickstarter structures accounts. So it becomes really irritating to me within this community that we do have a lot of people that are highly sensitive and that, want things the way that they want it. And for the creator, from the creator standpoint, it's something I hear quite often that it's challenging to deal with the personalities and the sometimes idiosyncrasies of some of these individuals. And so where the community has its strength, it also has its weakness because those people that share some of those thoughts or they're very vocal create sort of subcultures and rules, like a set of unwritten rules within the culture that can actually sometimes be hurtful to the creator and to, the whole setup, the whole process.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think, I think there are guys that are releasing really, really good games that need to do maybe 2 or 3 releases because they haven't backed a couple of 100 games. Mm-hmm. I mean, for me, I mean, personally, if I'm looking at a project and the person's not backed really anything at all, it kind of has me asking questions. It depends, because then I'll have a look at the kind of the campaign and look at the quality, but then I'll look at kind of social media. I mean, I think in general, in terms of the crowdfunding scene, if the first time that you're finding out about a campaign is when the campaign is live, I would argue that you've maybe not done the best job in the first place of making sure people are aware of your campaign. You know, if you're kind of saying, okay, if people are only aware of you now that you're on Kickstarter, as opposed to being aware of you kind of 3-4 months ago, I think that you maybe need to kind of maybe reassess where you are in terms of your marketing. I mean, I still, you know, we get a lot of creators on the show, and we get a lot of people that are on the show that we're speaking to them during the campaign itself.
Yeah.
And some of them are funded and they're ready, and some of them are trying to create kind of noise. And it can be really, really difficult to kind of create that noise and put that kind of different hat on.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And that's where I say, like, it's the greatest benefit and advantage in this community or within this sector, I guess, is the community, specifically the people and the backers and everyone involved. But again, it does come with its own set of interesting challenges, because if we talk about, you know, it's really interesting looking at trends. And if I look at trends of board games and tabletop games on Kickstarter versus other types of projects, they are so vastly different. For example, you know, just the other day I was speaking with somebody that, you know, they have a campaign on Kickstarter. It's a flashlight, and, you know, they're about a week and a half in, and they have about 40 days to go, or maybe they're 2 weeks in. And they expect to raise, you know, they're seeing daily increases in where many places, you know, many projects that are tabletop kind of anticipate a really large lull or drop in the campaign.
Yeah.
They're actually seeing day-to-day increases, or at least maintaining good daily consistent averages. And these are projects that launched with no pre-marketing, but are doing good and effective and heavy marketing during the campaign. And it's definitely a big difference that you see, is that, you know, if you look at a tabletop game and if it's not doing decently well within day 2, you know, most people say, well, it's a lost cause. You know, hopefully it just barely ekes by and hits 100%. But if you...
Do you think that's a bad thing? Do you think that's more of a cultural thing than an actual realism thing? Because I've had this discussion. Sure. I've had this discussion lots of times where people are talking about, and I mean, it's even been something that's become kind of more popular in the last kind of 8 months, where people are saying, well, these guys haven't funded in the first 48 hours, so that means they're going to kind of struggle. And I remember, I mean, the first project I was involved in was Heavy Steam, which was 4 or 5 years ago, maybe.
Yeah.
And that just toddled along and got funded.
Yep.
And then the next one just, again, shimmied along, you know, soft shoe shuffling along, creating, you know, getting the dollars. Now I'm going on to places where they're into their third day and people are kind of like raising their arms aloft to the sky and going, it's only 75% funded. To the ark! To the ark!
Right.
Gather the women and children, we shall never make it. And it's like, mate, you got like 27 days to go.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's just kind of like one of these strange things. Does it not force people to end up with ridiculously low kind of goals, as in funding goals?
It's the irony. Yeah, isn't it? I mean, it's ironic, right? I need backers to get to 100%, but nobody will back me until I'm 100%. It's a catch-22.
It's a Groucho Marx, isn't it? I wouldn't want to be a member of a club that wouldn't have me as a member, kind of thing. It's that kind of weird.
You can't be a member till you're a member. Yeah, it's that whole like argument that a lot of millennials have around, you know, you can't get a job unless you have experience, but you can't have experience till you have a job. Like,
exactly. Entry-level sales guy, at least 5.5 years experience, B2B business development. Must have soft skills.
Right.
You know, I mean, started selling when he was 12.5. Started
selling rocks to their buddies. But yeah, it's completely a cultural thing. And I think it comes from the fact that tabletop backers back tabletop projects. And Kickstarter actually there's a lot of people in the tabletop community that aren't really aware of the fifth tab. What I mean by the fifth tab is if you go to any Kickstarter campaign, there's a tab called Community. It surprises me how many people I talk to that I'm like, hey, click on that tab and let's look at that. And they don't even know about it. But if you go to a Kickstarter campaign, and I'm still on Dinogenics, but if you go to that campaign and you click on Community, which is the tab there, it opens up and shows how many backers came from outside of Kickstarter, like are brand new, first time to the platform, and how many are returning backers. And it's not like the most valuable data set, but it's really interesting to see trends. Because if we look at Dinogenics, for example, there's 2,600 backers that were returning backers and only 125 that are first timers. Now, if we look at that 125 and we probably break it down, that's probably like, around half of that's probably his like grandma and his aunt and his like sister and, a bunch of friends and family that have never done Kickstarter. But other than that, you don't get a ton of new backers for tabletop projects. Very rarely do you see a big ratio or a more favorable ratio to the new backers. Well, if you look at the only exception to that is if you look at IP campaigns. Like if you look at something that they utilized an IP and they're pulling from other places. Dark Souls is a great example.
Is a massive one.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to see the one thing that was mentioned about the Dark Souls board game was the kind of the relative toxicity of the community on there, because it was obviously people who weren't used to dealing in a crowdfunding kind of waiting for a product kind of concept that were kind of like saying, we were promised this 6 months ago, we demand the head.
Yeah.
Of the head of design. It's like, mate, if you have his head, they're not going to be able to finish the game.
Right.
But it was kind of interesting. Yeah, I mean, I remember going through the comments, Chandler, and reading about the first 15 and then kind of going and putting on something different instead, just to...
Yeah, I mean, even that one's like an exceptional example, but you look at that and the ratio is always better for those. But what's interesting, one of the reasons why this trend is interesting, though, is you look at other products on Kickstarter, which, by the way, we're brothers and sisters, right? Like, a lot of times the tabletop community considers themselves their own thing, but we're fighting the same battles in different categories. And what's interesting is there are projects that have more new backers than returning backers. In fact, there was one that I worked with. It was a campaign called Maluna. It was a cooler campaign. Really cool project. Product is phenomenal. And it doesn't make that creaking noise that all coolers make. It was like genius. Really, good design. But if you look at their backers, they had like 2,000 backers, some odd backers, but 1,500 of them were new backers, and only 500 or so were returning backers. And
yeah, but I don't think there's a hobby for that, is there? Do you know what I mean? You don't see people going to the cooler club on a Friday.
Correct. Yeah, there's not like a gang of people that are hanging out. Well, that's sort of true. And then you actually look at how he did that. So, excuse me. I got to know Scott, the creator, and we talked about how'd you do it? And in his case, he created an incredibly powerful Facebook group. He spent a couple $1,000 building a Facebook group that has, I think as of today, I'll have to look at its actual numbers, but I mean at the time it had like 10,000 people in that group, and which was actually super impressive. Yeah, it looks like he's roughly around like 12,000 even today. But what was really cool about his group is that there was a lot of organic sharing and people saying, check out my cooler, and they're showing a picture on their boat and in their, they're going out camping. And, anyway, there's just a community that he was successful at building a community around his product, which is different than the tabletop, which already has a community just built around tabletop. And so it's definitely a different challenge that they face, with those kinds of products. But I think there's some similarities we can learn from. And one of which is any time that we have a project, that we're bringing people to, if we rely too heavily on the existing community, that can hurt us. And we need to build our own community. We also need to find people that are outside the community and bring them in, and that's where everyone benefits. Anytime we have one of these IP campaigns, there's a lot of people that sort of get frustrated or complain. But I'm a fan of the IP campaigns because they bring new people into the community. And anytime that happens, it just benefits the whole community itself.
Here's a question for you. In terms of the guys that chuck in a buck, and I'm holding up both my hands at the moment and waving about my fabulous rings. As far as you've seen, is that paying dividends to kind of creators that run that style of campaign, where you offer the pound or the dollar backing to get involved and to stay updated with the campaign, and then once the campaign's finished, and then they're on to kind of the after sales side of things? Do you see and you'll know this, do you see like a decent uptake, or as far as you're concerned, is it always worthwhile kind of having a kind of like a kind of a pledge manager kind of situation afterwards? Mm-hmm. Is there a big uptake? I mean, I know of some. I have spoken to a couple of guys who said yes, absolutely, because what happened was that we ended up getting an extra, 15 pledges, or we ended up getting an extra $1,000, or we ended up getting $1,500, or it turned it from being a project that was a loss into a project that was a success.
Yeah.
So do you see that, in the background? Because I take it you obviously you would have metrics on that. Would you say is that a kind of a decent thing to consider if you are going to be running the campaign, to actually have a kind of a dollar pledge level so people can kind of join in?
I always recommend creating a pledge level specifically for it, and there's actually quite a few reasons why. The first and main reason is simply lowering the barrier to entry. Lowering the barrier to entry is how you be successful in e-commerce in general, any form of online sales. The less clicks you have, the more successful the conversion will be. That's just nature of human behavior. And so if I have provided somebody lower barrier, which is, even though the amount of money I'm spending for a $1 pledge and a $100 pledge is actually zero still, because you're not charged till after, even though that's the case, psychologically, there is a difference. And that is the reason why people don't back on projects that aren't 100% funded, because there's a psychological barrier. And the same thing goes for a $1 pledge. I feel like the barrier to me is lower, especially because I've probably had the experience of forgetting about a higher pledge and not getting out of it or something. So there's low commitment. Having that pledge level there for that reason is key. The second reason is, if you have that pledge level there, it also actually makes it easier for them to pledge. If you look at the way that Kickstarter is designed, as well as the app, the Kickstarter app, which I have backed campaigns through the app before, there's not actually an option through the app for me to select a no reward pledge level. There is on the computer, but not on the app. And so, as a backer on the app, or if I'm looking at a project on the app, which I think somebody did data on that once, and the number was somewhere around a quarter of pledges came through the app, if I remember correctly, which is a pretty decent number. In that, if I can get somebody to pledge and at least subscribe by doing that, that's of value to me. That's a benefit to me. So as a creator, I think it's a no-brainer to adding it for those reasons alone. Now, from the perspective that I have of Crowdox, which is we're a pledge management software. We help post-campaign organize the orders, organize the details and all the pledges. From that perspective, there's also a value as well. The main value comes that we actually have a direct API sync with Kickstarter. You may have seen Crowdox as a collaborator on campaigns, and the reason why is because Kickstarter actually created the fulfillment permissions for collaborators specifically based on our requests. We kind of worked on that with them. And so we have a good relationship with those guys, and they put that together so that we can gain access to the information that's pertinent to us. We don't need everything else, but we can grab the fulfillment-related data and then sync that directly into the software. And that's super, super helpful for the creators for numerous reasons. But the when it syncs that over, it actually syncs over all of the pledge levels and brings them into a page that they can see and view from one page, all of their pledge levels, how many backers are in each pledge level. And then once they've kind of coordinated the software, they can see how many items are being basically potentially shipped to each of those pledge levels. And so functionally within the structure of how that works, it's typically easier to deal with a pledge level in that respect. One of the reasons why, if I'm a $1 backer, for example, you can still set it so that there is shipping. A lot of people don't know, but they have three options when you're creating pledge levels. You can create it as a no shipping, a shipping to specific countries, or a shipping worldwide. And if you select shipping worldwide, but then put a $0 amount for the worldwide, it doesn't show them any dollar amounts, or it doesn't even show them $0, but it will allow you to collect a location, an address, or not an address, collect a country, from the Kickstarter drop-down box. And and so that later within Crowdox, that's valuable information. It helps you sort things better and all that jazz. But so there's kind of like the really practical reason, but then there's also like the marketing reason and how it benefits the campaign. The other benefit I forgot to mention as a part of those first two is as a new backer. Let's say I'm going into a project and I want to back a campaign. If I see that somebody else has, that there's a $1 pledge level that has 341 other people that have backed for $1, well, peer pressure jumps in and says, well, why am I not doing it, right? And I think that's a benefit to the creator as well. So from the creator's perspective, I'm a vote to pretty much have it all the time. And there's a few negatives that people bring up. Those negatives don't outweigh the benefits from my perspective.
I think the other thing is as well is if you are kind of signed up for notifications, then what will happen is that you'll get an email when somebody that kind of backs a game, but you're never told the actual amount. So if sometimes people will just chuck in a buck just to follow along progress, but what will happen is that's potentially kind of free marketing, because if that then goes to the 25 or 30 people that are following this person, then they'll get emails and it kind of draws them to kind of look at that as well. So it's kind of like it's interesting to see how Kickstarter itself is evolving, so that it's creating its almost like its own miniature marketing tools to help people kind of continue to market and continue to kind of grow. From your point of view, I mean, how did you get involved in kind of like Crowdox? I mean, what's the kind of the story behind that, Chandler?
So I got to know the Crowdox team. Crowdox been around for actually quite a while. Been around for, I think, coming up on 5 or 6 years, and it's been around, but kind of in the background. Didn't really grow. I got introduced and met with the two founders of Crowdox, Nathan and Aaron, and they both are software developers. They've created Crowdox from ground up. Really, pretty much just the two of them. And so, I mean, they're incredibly good at that aspect. And I saw so much potential having done this for so long. And to be honest, my real I guess reason why I was like, oh, Crowdox is awesome, I want to be involved, is because I wanted to be a part of that next step and that full experience of a campaign that is now successful. They've achieved success on the crowdfunding campaign, but now they are confronted with what I would consider the much more challenging and hard part of the campaign, which is everything else. From what Kickstarter is kind of the sexy part, right? You're raising money. It's really fun. Yeah. There's a lot of like cool stuff going on, and it's really exciting. But as soon as that campaign ends, it's hard. Like there's not as much excitement. You now have people like kind of with the expectation starts to really creep in, and people start getting grumpy for whatever reason, and then you happen to have now you have to go and manufacture, which is something that is really foreign. There's a lot of board game creators and designers that's what they're good at and they enjoy, but then you get to the part of actually making something and going to China or getting molds done or there's a lot of
sales tax and logistics and
all
boxes
that
and
it's very unsexy, right? And so as weird as it is, I wanted to get involved with the unsexy part, mainly because I think that there's a lot of need. There's a lot of need to have more success with this, because it would always frustrate me when I would see a creator that did a great job on Kickstarter and they raised so much money and they had so much success, and then they completely fell apart after the fact. And sometimes you just can't avoid that, because sometimes the business acumen that a person has does not match their level of success. So that you just, you can fake it till you make it, and there's a lot of people that do that well, but there's some people that just crumble. And and so I'd love the idea of getting involved with that aspect and, helping a success actually completely become a success. Because from my eyes, Kickstarter is while it is a cool creative platform, it's not really what it is. It's actually a business creating platform, or it could be. It can be a platform that allows somebody that is, they have a 9-to-5 job and they just love board games and they want to create one, so they make one. And then it does really well. And then they realize that they could actually make this their career. And then so you have these people. For example, I spent some time this weekend with Ryan Lockett of Red Raven Games. I mean, that guy is amazingly talented. The artwork that he can produce is just ridiculous. But he's a normal, I wouldn't call him an average Joe, but he's a normal guy that has, some talents, and he's applied himself to those talents and created a business out of that. And that comes with its own set of frustrations. And so with Crowdox, we can help alleviate some of the headache and manual labor and frustration of little aspects of that process, and let them kind of focus on things that they are good at and that they need to get done. And that's something I really enjoy. It's been really kind of fun.
So you're actually out there then providing them with a little bit of kind of support. I mean, if somebody says to you, well, how do I work this out? Do you say, well, listen, here's the resource you can go to? Have you ended up kind of as a business kind of building up a knowledge base? Because I work with businesses who sell on kind of Amazon. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I'll get somebody that comes along and says, okay, I'm not sure of the VAT or the tax ramifications and rules for selling into Germany. And now I, as a professional, I'm not going to turn around and say, well, get over 30,000 euros and then you have to register for VAT in Germany. I'm going to say, tell you what, here is an email address, go and email this person, and they are a VAT specialist and they will tell you everything that you kind of need to know.
Yeah.
Are you in that kind of situation where you're able to say, well, listen, if I can't get the answer, I'm not going to guess, but I do know somebody that is involved in, say, the shipping side of things, or I know somebody that can deal with getting you some boxes, or this is how you can deal with this kind of situation. Do you kind of offer help in that kind of respect as well?
Yeah, I very much consider my role and what I do more along the lines of consulting than sales for Crowdox in particular, because essentially we're saying, look, here's an option that is going to resolve and alleviate challenges, and then with that comes lots of questions, and all of these questions are very project specific. Like you're saying, there's some things that you're like, well, I don't know the answer to that. Like you need to talk to the right person. And so that's something I actually enjoy doing is sort of some matchmaking and getting people connected to fulfillment companies, or even more recently I got a guy that he didn't understand how accrual accounting worked, so that he can launch his campaign at the end of the year and still not have to pay taxes till the following till he ships.
Yeah.
And some people don't even know about that stuff, and so I day in and day out, those are things that I'm helping people with, and I absolutely love it.
Is it becoming a bit more of a competitive kind of market? I mean, in terms of what you're offering. I mean, there are other people out there that do what you do, and I won't mention them for fear of offending you. So,
right?
I mean, I've got to ask the question: How do you talk about pledge managers when one of your competitors is called
Pledge Manager?
It's kind of like, what do you say? I'd like to. It's like saying to people, "Are you satisfied with your Hoover?"
Right. Yeah, you're spraying Windex and it's not called Windex.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No,
or drinking it, depending what night.
Well, yeah, depending where you are, right? I guess they do that in your country. No, it is interesting, and there is, of course, competition, and of course, as many people would probably say, like, competition's a good thing, and I actually agree. And I don't really have much to say on either of the two other. I really only consider that we have about two other competitors, Pledge Manager, as you mentioned, and BackerKit, and both are good companies. Both are legit services. They offer different features, but most of them are actually, they're going to solve some of the same things that we do. The difference is, and as we try to compare, you come down to two different types of differences. One difference is I guess the value proposition, so features, all of the little details of how the software functions, stuff like that. Those things do have variations between the three. As I said, all three are going to get you to the same result usually, but not necessarily with the same experience. And we've tried to make a major focus on our software being a very powerful solution. It's not very complex, and it also, one of the two are highly complex and can leave some challenges, for the creator within setting it up and also managing things, while the other, kind of relies heavily on, itself, basically its own team to help support and do all of the setup and all of the exports and all, everything related. What we've tried to do is sort of find a middle ground, and Crowdox, we're kind of a middle ground between these two services. As we try to compare them, a lot of people are kind of recognize that pricing wise, we've priced ourselves, to be very competitive. We're not looking for a percentage of the campaign funding total. We're very reasonable in the pricing model with a per backer fee and a percentage of what we help raise that's extra. So that's a competitive advantage. A lot of people really enjoy our pricing model and how that kind of breaks down for them. The other thing though comes down to sort of the means by which we do things. We're invested in this space. We are very interested in the creators. We grew just like most of our customers did, out of a garage kind of thing. We, built on the side as like a side hustle until we eventually grew Crowdox big enough that, we could jump on board and actually now have a team of like 12 people full time. And so we've kind of gone through that entrepreneurial experience that most of our customers have gone through or are going through. And that reflects in how we interact with everyone that we work with. It hopefully shows well to those individuals. So you don't become a number in kind of a factory, process. But instead we really work very hard to tailor and to, not necessarily tailor the software, but tailor the experience to each creator. And that's kind of an important part of what we do. And as part of that, part of our fee structure has been basically taken off. We have a $300 software access fee. Sometimes it's anywhere from $250 to $300, but that fee we don't ever really charge as a set upfront fee. We trade it for copies of the games, basically. And that's important to us because we want to be champions for the projects we work for. We want to have, like I talked about at the beginning of this conversation, is, I'm trying to play the games of the creators we work with, and that's one because I want to know what they're like, and I really enjoy them. But also we want to speak from experience and say, yeah, this is an awesome game, and be able to kind of champion for these creators.
That's cool. If this has been fascinating to me. As I say, we're always interested in kind of gently kind of filling in the different pieces of the puzzle with regards to, we got a lot of creators listening, we got a lot of first-time creators listening, we got a lot of guys who are currently sitting with a table of white pieces and black pieces of paper and some sellotape over a dice who are, making those first commitments into kind of generating a game kind of thing. So, just finding out about, just your thoughts in general is always in it, because I'm a nosy person. As I said at the beginning,
makes you good at what you're doing, I guess.
If people are interested in finding out more, where do you exist on kind of like the interweb nets, Chandler?
Probably the best place where someone would get in touch with us is on our website, crowdox.com. So it's Crowdox. Some people have kind of slaughtered the name, but it's the whole idea of Crowdox. We try to bear the load like an ox would, right? So that's kind of that's where the name. Actually,
I suppose crowd donkey would sound ridiculous.
That's definitely part of it. Full disclosure, actually, the name originally came from the fact that it was the shortest URL. It was really? the easiest and shortest URL that we could find that worked, and then we kind of played with that a little bit, and like, oh, yeah, ox, they help people, they help bear the burdens. But anyway,
of course, there's some people that think you're being clever because you've got the name Crowd and then put an X on the end.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting scenario. But yeah, so they could go to our website. They could reach out there. They can also, most of my interactions happen to be through Facebook. So I am on Facebook actively connecting with people and happy to help and trying to jump in those communities and groups where people ask questions. So, but yeah, that would be the best way. And they can also email us directly, sales@crowdox.com. Cool. So whatever works.
Awesome. Thanks for that. What we'll do is we shall make sure we put those links in the show notes, so we've got notes to show. If you want to keep an eye on what we're up to, then jump on to go to interwebs and type in We're Not Wizards, and you shall find us on Twitter and Facebook, and we're on Instagram, and we're on YouTube. And if you want to read some of our words, you can go to we'renotwizards.blogspot.com. If you want to find a website, you can find us on we'renotwizards.com. If you want to chuck us a buck to help keep the lights on, then go to patreon.com/we'renotwizards. You can find us on various different places in terms of podcast catchers. So you've got Stitcher and Player FM and Acast and Spreaker and Podknife, and you can also actually find us on Podbean as well. If you've liked what you've listened or enjoyed or found it interesting like I have, please go to Apple Podcasts and consider dropping us a subscription. If you like us even more, consider dropping us a rating or a review. And as we say, if you are going to give us a review, don't give us 10 stars because it makes us big-headed, but don't give us 1 star because it makes us cry. Give us 5 because it's in the middle and it's average, and we're just a little bit average. But the gentleman who's not been average tonight is the rather wonderful, very interesting Mr. Chandler Copenhaver. Thank you very much for being on, sir.
Hey, appreciate being here.
There's only 2 more things to do. The first thing is to remember that we are many things, but we're not wizards. Are we wizards, Chandler?
Not yet. One day.
I can edit this whole thing, so all you say through the whole show is you love Pledge Manager, you love Pledge. No, I'm not going to do that. That would be nice. It's a threat though, it's a viable threat. And the second thing is to say goodbye. So it's a goodbye from Chandler. Say goodbye, Chandler.
Goodbye.
And it's a goodbye from me. Remember, stay safe, roll6s.com. And as I said, it's always nice to kind of fill in the last piece of the puzzle. And the tabletop industry is becoming an industry. It's not just about an idea in somebody's bedroom. It's about how you get your art done, how you create your game, how you get it manufactured, and also how you take care of those lovely backers once the campaign is finished. But until the next time, goodbye.
A wizard is never late. Nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to.